Ambassador Mark Brzezinski. Kasia used to be president and managing director for many years of Discovery in MEA. When she opened Discovery office in Poland in the year 2000, it was the army of 3. Now it's 4,200 people. She's president and managing director of Warner Bros. Discovery and CEO of TVN. And Ambassador Brzezinski, the United States ambassador to Poland, of course, and previously United States ambassador to Sweden. And what is fascinating, as far as I know, in the year 2015, he was asked by the White House to create American strategy towards the Arctic Circle. The world would be a wonderful place if the Arctic would be the most important topic of our life. But unfortunately, it's not the case. Maybe in a year to come. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and welcome, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So awesome to be back here in Poznan.
Exactly, Mr. Ambassador, because you do have National Mall in Washington, D.C., with Washington Monument and Lincoln Memorial, right? And someone would say that National Mall in Poland is in Kraków or in Warsaw, but it's in Poznań. Where are the graves of Mieszko and Bolesław Chrobry? In Poznań, right? This is the sacred city of Polish history, so it's great to have you in Poznań, Mr. Ambassador. Redefining the world, this is the topic of our conversation, but we don't have 20 hours, but 20 minutes. Yuval Harari wrote a short history of tomorrow. Let's try to talk about short, brief history of yesterday and today. What are the most important lessons, in your opinion, from very different perspectives, as a diplomat and as a leader of such a global organization? What are the most important lessons for all of us after 2 years of pandemic and after 2 months of such a horrible war? Kasiu.
Well, as you said, we are kind of writing our history every moment now, every day now, and it's a very unsettled moment. It's a very unsettled times for all of us, and those times, you know, it's unpredictable. We are worried about the world. We're worried about our personal lives. We have no idea where it's going to go. And I think that for us as a media company and for the businesses, it's also unpredictable. Yes, it's also unpredictable, and we had to face the COVID, 2 years of COVID, and now we're facing the war and how we react. And there's something at the bottom of it which says that, you know, going back to your values, what you stand for, is really the moment where you fight the unpredictability. A lot of change, obviously, a lot of change in the world, a lot of different ways of working, and we know that Zooms instead of meetings, and we survived, yes, but also a lot about the values, going out and helping the others, helping the Ukrainians, helping people impacted by COVID. And I think you have to stand as a company for those values and follow them. And we do it. We did it with the concerts for Ukraine. We did it with collecting money during the COVID for all the causes that were important.
Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, and it's great to be on stage with my friend Kasia. So what were the lessons learned from the pandemic and now from this crisis in Ukraine? I can think of 2, Piotr. First, being practical. And I'm a child of 2 people from Eastern Europe. My late father, Zbigniew Brzezinski, was from Poland, and my mother from Czechoslovakia. And those 2 East Europeans taught my brother and sister and I, whether we liked it or not, how to be practical when we were growing up, first in New Jersey in America, and then in Virginia. We wore secondhand clothes. We ate food from our garden. In fact, organic cooking and farm to fork, that was our life back in the 70s and 80s. Only now is it popular. But my parents were really super practical in terms of what works financially, what works logistically. And that was the lesson from the pandemic. We got to figure out how we make this work. How do we do online education so it works? How do we keep our jobs going so it works, even though we can't meet each other? How do we do diplomacy and connect with people around the world? Diplomacy is a people-to-people job. How do we do that virtually? So we had to learn how to be practical during the pandemic. And the second point, especially as it pertains also to the Ukraine crisis, is know who your friends are. And I invoke that because this Ukraine crisis is not just Poland's problem. It is an international problem, and it is important that others share in and join in this crisis. and I'm so proud to be U.S. ambassador to really a humanitarian superpower, Poland. At this time, we now have 12,500 troops, U.S. troops in Poland, to secure Poland. And I'm pleased to tell you that just last night, the House of Representatives in Washington passed legislation to deploy $40 billion to secure Ukraine and help protect Ukraine for the future.
It is truly amazing. Can I follow on the issue of your personal history? Because it's absolutely amazing that the history of your family is such an important part of history of the United States and history of Poland. Your grandfather was crossing the ocean to Canada. Your father was such an important person in the US administration, advisor to President Carter. And now you were crossing the ocean in the opposite direction, coming to Poland in a way to defend also Polish and American freedom. How does it make you feel?
Well, I feel like I'm living a dream every day. You have to understand that while my mom is from Czechoslovakia, I grew up in a Polish household. Let me emphasize that. Zbigniew Brzezinski's household was a Polish household, and my brother and sister and I learned to love Poland years before we ever visited Poland. And so to come to Poland as U.S. ambassador for President Biden, who loves Poland as well. Remember, he's a Scranton guy, home of Polish Americans, is an awesome opportunity. And my grandfather had been a Polish diplomat, not a U.S. diplomat, but a Polish diplomat. He had been sent as consul general to Montreal just before the Nazi invasion of Poland, and that probably saved his life. But after World War II, he couldn't get a job. He sold insurance in Canada, door to door, for the rest of his life, and he wasn't that successful. He would have loved to have been an ambassador. So every millisecond that I serve as an ambassador in Poland, I walk in his shadow, and I feel just so unbelievably lucky to have this mission.
Kasia, I want to get back to the beginning of the pandemic, because we cannot count on stability, but we can count on change, constant change. If just before the pandemic, we would have an idea in TVN24 to talk to our guests via smartphone application, I would expect your call that you would tell us, hey, we have our beautiful studio, invite our guests to our studio, we have satellite tracks. And suddenly we are absolutely okay using iPhones for a connection. So that was astonishing for me how quickly such a global organization was able to adapt. And that's also an important lesson, right?
I think it's a very important first lesson for us overall, because the world is just speeding up. It's moving faster and faster. When I was a student at Harvard University, one of our professors was talking about the Red Queen effect. And he said that, for business, Red Queen effect is you're going to run faster and faster, but you're going to only stay in place. And that's very meaningful today. The pace of change is just unbelievable, and we have to be adaptable to that change and make bold decisions, sometimes not knowing what's going to happen in 10 to 20 years. You've been talking about your roots, your family, and in a sense, you started talking about, being 18-year-old. My son is actually turning 18 in a month. And telling him, what are you going to do, what university to choose, where to go, what's going to be the future, what will be a job in 20 years, is a massive question mark. So I think that one of the things that pandemic has taught us, and taught us as an organization as well, is you have to be agile, you react, you adapt, and you make bold decisions. And those bold decisions are really important today. And, just to mention, for instance, the war in Ukraine and making decisions of withdrawing, pulling your business out of Russia, for instance. We've done it within a week. We pulled all of our business out of Russia. Not an easy decision, because it has a huge impact on the company, economic impact on the company. But this is, again, going back to the values. You stick to your values, and you follow your values. You walk the talk, if I could say that.
For decades, we are absolutely sure that the world would be more and more global. Yet, in a time of pandemic, we realized that we don't have new cars in Europe or in the US because we lack microchips produced in China, or probably most of antibiotics on the US market are imported from China. When there is a problem in China, it's a problem in the United States. And now we have war. Do you think that this is the end of globalization as we know it, or maybe just the next chapter?
Well, thank you, Piotr, for that question. I actually think that the war in Ukraine, while it has local roots in Eastern Europe, absolutely has global reach in three ways. First, what is acceptable behavior between people, and what we are bearing witness to in Mariupol, in Bucha. We now have the ability to share what happens locally in an instant to billions of people around the world, thanks to iPhones. And we are all able to bear witness. And it bears asking the question, what does never again mean? Never again is invoked for the worst crimes in history. And Poland is a land of great victimization. The worst crimes, the Holocaust, occurred here. What can we do as a world to ensure that never again means something? Second, security-wise, we don't want to live in a world where big states can bully weaker states or smaller states. And that is precisely what is at stake in terms of the Ukrainian fight against Russia now. And we, the Americans, see only one just result in this, and that is the Ukrainian people and the fighter-in-chief of Ukraine, President Zelensky, tossing the Russian invaders out of Ukraine. And we are doing everything we're doing everything we can to stand shoulder to shoulder with our Polish brothers and sisters to supply the Ukrainian people with all they need to do that. And then lastly, economically, we want a world of prosperity for our children. And what has happened in Eastern Europe, it has the possibility of destabilizing the region, has the possibility of destabilizing the continent. And we are working assiduously with our European counterparts to make sure that that doesn't happen. But these things have local roots and global reach, and it's important for the international community to come together as it is to address it.
I still can't believe that we in TVN, we are part of such a global organization as Warner Bros. Discovery. It's even hard to imagine bigger media organization on the world. What does it mean global for us now in these difficult times?
Well, I think that we all see how important it is to kind of redefine what we stand for and what connects us. And this is, you know, as terrible, as deadly the situation is and the war is, it also brings a completely different connectivity between certain parts of, obviously, of the world and coming together. And television is a powerful media. Television has power. And television that actually can travel, as we are now, as you mentioned, Piotr, we are a part of the biggest media company in the world that operates globally, that has its outlets everywhere, that actually can bring stories and can support the right values and doing the right thing globally. And we have examples of that. We just recently have example that actually the content and the programs that we've been filming, we've been doing reportages in Ukraine, in the war zone. We have broadcasted, we have premiered across the world. They just premiered in the US on Discovery+. The concert that maybe some of you have seen for Ukraine it has been broadcasted live in 50 markets across Europe, but it also has been now broadcasted in the US again on Discovery+. It found its home in Discovery+. And this spot with the little girl singing the anthem went viral and actually reached over 200 million people across the world. And that's the power of media. That's the power of being a part of the global group. But it also comes with responsibility. And I think this is really, really important to say. In the world where, you know, maybe in the past, and I think that was Professor Harari that was actually saying that in the past, actually censorship came with the limitation of access to information. Today, it's about flooding irrelevant information. And being the source of reliable information, being the source of trusted information, as TVN is and as CNN is hugely important. We learned how this trust was important to the Polish people over the last year. We saw that. We know how important freedom of media and pluralism is to us as a company, to our American owners, but also to American people. And we're massively, massively grateful for all those support that we received from, as I said, American owners, but also American administration.
And if I can just add to that, Piotr, you know, for us in the Biden administration and for President Biden, you know, it's a little bit like dialectical behavioral theory. Several things can be true at the same time. We stand foursquare with the polls on security, and we stand foursquare with the polls on democracy, on freedom of media, and for a vibrant exchange of ideas and information. And we, the Americans, as guests in your countries, are just so impressed by the vibrant exchange of ideas. It can be tough, it can be hard, it can be critical sometimes, and that's what happens in a democracy, in the competition of ideas to get to the best result, to get to the best decisions, a competition of ideas. And we're just so proud to stand with the principle and the practice of freedom of media. And we also love the social media culture of Poland. So many innovative ideas and exchanges come out of it, and our embassy does everything we can to engage on that. I even have a German Shepherd dog named Teddy who has his own Instagram site, hashtag everyone, Ambassador Teddy. Please like it.
True, true. It's a great story. Miss Ambassador, I want to follow on that because we have two choices in a time of war. We can say, let's forget about freedom, let's forget about rights, let's unite over a strong leader, because democracy is messy. It can be messy in Poland, it can be messy in the United States. And there is a second option. Let's cherish our messy democracy. When we look towards East, it's so much better to live in a messy democracy. And it looks like we see that it's so important for us even more now than before the war.
Well, that's a really interesting question because, you know, as you mentioned earlier, I served for 4 years as U.S. ambassador to Sweden. And Sweden, a Nordic country, very much makes decisions by consensus, by collective decision-making between the left and the right. And I was asked sometimes in Sweden, do the different competing sides hate each other in America? That it's so aggressive, the political debate. And it's true. We have a different constitutional democracy than the democracy found in Sweden. And it's based, our constitutional model is based on advocacy of ideas and even adversarialness between ideas. And it can be loud, sometimes really loud, in our political debate in America. But make no mistake, that is how we make decisions, through a competition of ideas, through a free media. That is a central part of our democracy, and we respect what we see happening elsewhere, including in Poland.
If someone would ask you, Kasia, because you mentioned that and it's so important when we think about our kids, what job, how can we decide what university they should choose if we don't know what jobs they are going to have in 2030 or 40? So how can we predict what's going to happen to the world? What can we tell our viewers how to be prepared for the change, or just try to live with it?
Well, I think that, anyway, that's what I say to my kids. What's most important, I believe, in the future, and also when I talk with kind of new people joining the organization, for us young people that are joining our organization, it's really flexibility of mind, flexibility and adaptability. I think that those are the key issues, I would say, key virtues for somebody young coming. I would go back maybe at the end to the values once again, just to mention that, because it's also not just for the companies, but we can see that with the consumers. We can see that with the viewers, how important that is. And this is really something that companies cannot compromise on today, because we can see what happens with the war in Ukraine and how consumers are reacting, yes? And you can lose a lot. You can lose a lot of your trust as a company. You can lose a lot of goodwill if you don't follow sometimes those decisions are not really economically, profitable for the company, but they're important. And I think that those are two things for the kids in the future and for the companies, I would say. Act fast, act bold, be agile, be flexible, and have a flexibility of mind to follow where the world and where the people, where the consumers go.
Mr. Ambassador, one last question, because on the day of his inauguration, John Kennedy said, "We shall pay any price, we'll bear any burden, we'll stand against any foe to support the success of liberty." But that was the time when America wanted to be the captain of the free world. America has its own problems, but do you think that once again, America would like to be the captain of the free world? Do you feel that you are ready to pay the price, to bear any burden?
You know, Piotr, at the beginning of this crisis in Ukraine, I was invited to TVN24. I was so glad, as whenever I am. And I was able to communicate to the people of Poland that Polska jest bezpieczna I Polska jest zabezpieczona. Poland is safe and Poland is secure. And way more important after I said that is I asked our president and our vice president and secretary of defense to all come as quickly as they could to Poland, because they run our ship of state. They are able to guide where our massive military and our lethal military are able to put their footprint. And within 8 weeks, all had put their feet on Poland, and our president had communicated to the people of Poland that we will defend every square inch of NATO territory, including Poland, because Poland represents a land of liberty, it is a sovereign country, and it is a country of freedom. And those are ironclad words that we say to you, and that is walking the walk, not just talking the talk, in terms of it as an answer to your question.
This is a great line to finish our conversation. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, such an honor. Kasia, Kieli, Ambassador Mark Brzezinski. Thank you so much.